Dr. Martell, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And Veronica, I'm going to kind of let you start this conversation because I know that Dr. Martell has a wealth of knowledge and information to share with us today.
Great. Thank you. Dennis, I want to start off by asking you about your center and the work that you do. So can you tell us what the social norm promotion plays in overall health improvement?
Thank you, Veronica, and it's good to see you again. The Social Norms Center at Michigan State University, we have been doing social norms approach now for over 20 years. The social norms approach is what we like to call the science of the positive. It's a non-prescriptive way of telling people what they do. We don't tell people what to do, we tell people what they do. In other words, we do the research and look at all the factors and then tell back to the people what it is that the norm is. If there is a norm surrounding anything from alcohol to tractor safety, we try to tell people what the norm is, and then if there is a difference in the perception, many people call the social norms approach misperception change theory. There's a perception of, let's say, a college students coming to MSU. If you ask the incoming freshmen what percentage of MSU students you believe are sexually active, they will tell you like 90%, 95%. In reality, if you ask them then how many students you think are you sexually active, or if you ask the college student at MSU if they're sexually active, and it comes to around 70%. So what we try to do is change the perceptions to meet the reality. And what we've seen over 20 years of doing this is if the perception changes, then the behavior also changes.
So how can we use that social norm promotion when we talk about vaccination? Can you help us understand that?
Well, it's finding out if there is a misperception about vaccination. Now, actually, with vaccination, it was really interesting. When we did our first research in the fall or the spring of 2020 on vaccines, we asked MSU students what percentage of MSU students you think would be vaccinated. And they told us about 70, 60% of students would be vaccinated. And then we asked them, would you be vaccinated? Is that what you're going to do? And we got about 85, 90% of them. So actually, we couldn't really use social norms approach with vaccination. But what we do is ask students why you'd be vaccinated. And why you be vaccinated would be anything from we want to protect our fellow students. We want to protect the instructors in classes. We want to protect the grounds workers and the culinary workers. So using social norms approach, it's a positive approach. It doesn't necessarily, like I said, be prescriptive in telling people what to do. It just tells them what they think. And there are two different types of normative statements we use. There's descriptive norms, which is what people actually do. And then there is injunctive norms of what people approve of. And injunctive norms are actually more powerful. If you ask people what they approve of, they will tell you exactly what they approve of, and then you use that to try to change the norm. So if 90% of people in the state of Michigan approve of others getting vaccinated, that's something the rest of the population needs to know.
Does risk susceptibility to illness or disease, does that play into the social norm process in any way?
It does. It's a very interesting concept. It's called the extended parallel process model, in which when you're faced with a threat or a fear, any threat or fear, there are four processes that happen in your mind almost instantaneously. First of all, you assess the severity of the threat. Second of all, you assess the susceptibility. Am I susceptible to this threat? First one being is this threat severe? The second one is, am I susceptible to it? And then your mind goes right away to the second part of the process is, what about the response? Is the response efficacious? And the fourth part of it is, can I use this response? So when it comes to COVID, what has happened here is the response efficacy has been distorted by incorrect information, by politics. And what we have here is a sense where people know that COVID is severe. People who have a relative impact know that they're susceptible. In other words, if somebody in their family or their social get together, whatever, has gotten COVID, then they know they might be susceptible. So we come to response efficacy. The response efficacy is the problem here, is because we know science and a vaccine does work. But what has been distorted is all the information out there about the vaccine doesn't work. The actual efficacy of the response itself, whether I can use it, that's easy. You can go anywhere and get the vaccine. It is the efficacy of the response itself that is a challenge here because of all the distortion.
I know Anne has some questions for you about parents and communication with doctors. Anne, I want you to go ahead and have a chance to talk to Dennis too.
Dennis, this has to be fascinating for you right now during the pandemic because we haven't had a pandemic in our lifetime and you study social norms. What are you learning through this pandemic? What are some of the things that you want our listeners to know that you have learned about being in a pandemic and the social norms involved with it?
Well, I think what I tell parents and what I tell even administration and what I tell my own family is to reframe everything. We need to reframe it into a discussion that draws away the emotion from it. So let's talk for a minute about the concept. I like to study the anthroposophy of words. In other words, the anthropological philosophy, breaking down the origin. The true definition of health is the capacity we have at any given moment to be in this world, to interact with the world, and get back to it. So health is the capacity we have at any given moment. Now, every parent wants their kids to be well. Wellness is an aspiration. So what I try to do with parents and say, do you want to increase the capacity of your children to be academically and socially successful? We reframe the whole conversation. What the pandemic has done has given us a lot of anxiety without a response. And that is a disaster for parents when they're thinking about how to protect their kids. The normal way to do that is to think about the science. Now, science is another word for knowledge. And we have this political and distortion of what science is. I tell people to trust the science, or I tell them, trust the knowledge that's out there that got you this far in life and your kids. So it's really about trying to understand the reframing of the topic. And the topic should be done in a way that's both kind, respectful, caring, and in a way that you can talk to your kids about it.
I think that's so important, making sure that you're meeting those parents with empathy because they really do want to do what's best for their children.
And before we let you go, Dennis, how do you feel you're doing with regard to this, convincing people to follow the science and make the right decisions?
Well, what we're doing is trying to, with the social norms approach, is really trying to change perception. We have what we call protective norms too. If we're not trying to get anyone to necessarily change a behavior that's ingrained in them, what we're trying to do is also get them to talk about the protective behaviors. When it comes to alcohol, we've learned that not necessarily telling people not to drink, but to stay with your friends and to set a limit on drinking. So what we have learned with the social norms approach is that culture change is hard. Changing and leaving the emotions out of a discussion like a pandemic is very hard. Everyone is tired. Everyone has anxiety at this point. What we do with the social norms approach is just telling the truth. It's non-prescriptive. It's a positive approach. We don't tell people that you necessarily have to stop a behavior. We're just telling them what they do. And I think that's the one statement I would leave you with is be honest. Be honest, be empathetic, be caring. It's a hard time right now. Nobody's been through a pandemic unless you're 120 years old. So no one knows what to expect on the other side. The thing that we've seen from the research is that a lot of the students and a lot of the parents are very nervous about the future. And so what we have to do is with a caring, kind approach, and with empathy and compassion, just tell them the truth. And the truth will set you free in most cases.
Dennis Martell, Director of Health Promotion and Executive Director of the National Social Norms Center at Michigan State University. Thank you for the time today. It was really nice talking to you.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You too. You are listening to Why I Vaccinate. We'll be back right after this.